So, Raya and the Last Dragon is a great example of the current state of not only Disney, but just writing in general. It really baffles me how they could mess something up this badly. What could have been an interesting world with a different kind of message than most Disney movies was a half-baked, inconsequential mess with a message so diluted and nonsensical, it's hard to see how the script got past the editor. Anyway, it seemed to me the movie was so caught up in the fact that it was the first East Asian Disney movie or whatever that I forgot to actually be a good movie. Like, was it nice they spent a lot of time researching cultures and outfits and like all that? Like, absolutely, because that always really helps to make a movie have like feel richer and more in depth. But like, it would have been better if they had spent an equal amount of fervor in the writing of this film, which it is highly evident that they did not. So let's start with the premise. It's pretty simple. Like I said, it could have been interesting. There's these evil things called Droon that turn people into stone, and the dragons all die getting rid of them in order to save the humans, and the last dragon disappeared, so they think like she's still alive somewhere, but no one knows where she is. The country is called Kumandra, and it's split into several different factions who all hate each other, and they all hold one piece of this dragon stone, which holds all of the dragon magic, which expelled the Droon to begin with. So the main character, Raya, is traveling around the countries, gathering the pieces so she can put it back together and bring her father back, who is turned to stone. Alright, so, with the premise out of the way, let's just address the elephant in the room. Sisu was pretty annoying, however, she wasn't as bad as some people made her out to be. Yeah, she had cringy lines.
Look how close my butt is to my head!
Like, a bunch of them, actually. But she also had some somewhat funny times. I actually thought the credit gag was kind of funny, and her plan to fix everything in the end was also entertaining. So while she was responsible for like some of the worst moments in the film, she also had some of the most entertaining lines. But she kind of represents everything wrong with this movie. She's very modern in how she talks, like what she says, and while sometimes there can be somewhat funny or entertaining jokes because of this, it ultimately drags the story down, and the movie really suffers because of this weird approach to the dialogue. Alright, so what exactly makes the dialogue so bad? I think the most irritating aspect of this movie was the level of insincerity in the writing, and the fact that the writers seemed too preoccupied with writing in a certain style instead of actually writing authentically to the story. I was legitimately able to predict what the characters were gonna say before they said it, because the writing was that predictable. Getting back to the point, I feel like they wanted Raya to be sort of a cool warrior, but also simultaneously like relatable and funny, that kind of charismatic lead. Though not impossible to do, it can be a fine line to make a character that believably encapsulates all these traits. The setting felt like it should hold a more serious tone, and for some reason, anytime a character opened their mouth, they sounded like a 21st century idiot. Any immersion that they could have had is just ruined. And it's not even just because of Sisu. If Sisu was the only one who was more in the vein of absurd comedy, it wouldn't be as bad. Like, it would still be tonally weird. The setting is a fantasy land where the apocalypse has happened, and all the main characters have lost their families and like friends, and like basically entire society is falling apart. So the tone of the movie should probably match the plot, at least somewhat. And I'm not saying everyone needs to talk like it's Shakespearean time. Just cut back on some of the weirdly modern lines.
I wish to join this fellowship of butt kickery.
So one of the worst decisions the movie made was making Raya herself a main culprit in this cringe fest dialogue.
Really? A con, baby? You and the dragon are coming with me. My sword here says we're not.
They had a somewhat interesting premise and a different kind of world, and while nothing was fleshed out at all, it could have been something kind of cool and interesting. I really don't understand why they had to undercut any earnest moment with some stupid, cringy dialogue. They were so lame for the majority of the movie. Anytime it wanted to be cool, like the fights, it just wasn't, because we've been exposed to watching this character be uncool for 90% of the film. So anytime they do their cool chanty music with shots of her doing fighting stuff or whatever, it almost comes off as try-hardy, because we're sitting here like, yeah, okay, this cringe fest is just so intimidating, instead of like what the feeling is supposed to be, which is like, uh-oh, stuff's gonna go down. And this cringy dialogue wasn't even the only thing that was bad about the movie, as I said previously. Like, the actual point of the movie is terribly done, and Namari is a prime example. Why is the movie framing her as the correct one at the end? Did the writers watch their own movie? Point A, if they wanted to make this point, they should have had Sisu dying actually being Raya's fault. It should have been set up in a way that Raya was the one who pulled something during the meetup. Then Namari would have had a point. But no, the good guy can't actually be wrong. And point B, up until that point, contrary to what some people have said, I think they did at least try. I don't think they did a great job, but they did sort of spreading out the times when Raya was right about not trusting people blindly, like anytime Sisu just randomly decided that someone was trustworthy because she's an idiot. And it ended up being like, oh yeah, Raya was right. And then when Raya gradually gives someone trust because she spent more time around them, like how she kind of gradually begins to trust Boone and the baby and the guy from Tong or whatever his name was. The last one is a good example. She did go out on a limb to trust that he would help them get out of the village when the Mari showed up with her, we'll call it an army for now, when she saw what the Droon had done to his like town and stuff. They did set up the point that's like, okay, maybe you have to be more trusting because not everyone's gonna be out to get you, but then also like Sisu is really trusting and then she causes problems because of that. So like the setup isn't bad. It kind of shows two sides of that, and you don't want to be on the extremes, but all the times we see Raya being proved right is suddenly just swept under the rug because now it's time to make a point about our hero being wrong when she actually wasn't, because we suck at writing and won't commit to making our main character actually do something incorrect, which is not a problem solely belonging to this movie. Sometimes it really feels that writers never want to make their characters ever be wrong about something, but they still want to have the emotional payoff of, oh, you were wrong and you need to change. So instead they do this horrible, oh, look how wrong they were, when they either aren't wrong, like Raya, or the thing they did/said is so lukewarm, it barely counts as something bad. If you're going to go the route of change and redemption, the character has to have done something in order to need the redemption or change to start with. And to top it all off, the film not only says it's bad Raya doesn't blindly trust people, but Sisu is correct because hundreds of years ago she trusted her siblings, which apparently is the same thing as trusting some random person you don't know, or even worse, trusting Namari, who has literally proven on several occasions that she cannot be trusted. Not only was the point of the movie nonsensical, it was also hammered into the audience in nearly every scene, but instead of us seeing how Raya was wrong, they just had Sisu as the stand-in for the writer saying, oh, Raya, you're being too closed and you have to be trusting. And it's like, except that she's kind of right like 90% of the time, so that's not a good look for your point. By the end of the movie, when Raya and Namari are having their big fight in the castle and Namari's like, oh, you did this is your fault, you're why Sisu died, or whatever, it's like, oh, cut me a break. You're the one who pulled the trigger and Raya was reacting to you, not vice versa. If they wanted to make that point, they should have flipped that. It was so stupid. I'm not even kidding. If they had made that fight scene and they had made Raya just killed Namari, that would have been amazing. If she had like stopped right here,
But you're as much to blame for Sisu's death as I am.
delivered that line, and then like Raya would just like pull her up and just stab right in the stomach and like just like say so the coldest line. I might have almost forgiven like everything in this movie. That would have been amazing. Obviously I wouldn't expect that because it's a children's movie, but still, that's what I wanted to happen because Namari she just freaking sucks. So in conclusion, could the movie have actually been good? Yes, definitely. Given a good writing team, I think they really could have turned Kumandra into an interesting new world with rich history and people groups and really had something great to work with. But as is, nah. It's movies like these that need remakes. Some good ideas, terrible execution. And that's not a call to remake this movie, by the way. We can forget about that. Goodbye. Hey, also, just so you know, I started a new channel where I share some of my artwork and do comics and show some of my process and progress and stuff like that. So if you're interested in seeing that, check that out. Links in the description. You have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for watching.